Hi everyone. It's been quite a while since I made a video, but I'm going to get back in the swing of it again, I think. The topic for this segment is something that's just occurred to me in the last couple of weeks that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about a type that I have not paid as much attention to as some others with respect to, of the Myers-Briggs temperament indicator, and that is the ENFJ. Now, it strikes me in retrospect as a bit curious that I haven't, because I have had very many ENFJs of great importance in my life. My mother is an ENFJ. Three of my closest friends of many years standing are ENFJs. And I've also had the privilege of being fondly acquainted with several more ENFJs. So it's not like I haven't had exposure to them. And as I've said, I've had very intimate experience with several. It was also the case, it just struck me very recently that my best friend from high school for the first few years must have been an ENFJ as well. We lost touch a very long time ago, but I mean, she's now working for a major humanitarian organization in London. And when I think back on how driven and ambitious and bubbly and outgoing and structured and organized and high achieving and all of those things that ENFJs tend to be, I really think she must have been one. Anyway, we can't know for sure, but I think part of the reason why my attention wasn't as captured by the ENFJ type is because I was taking for granted that this type was more similar to my own ENFP than in fact it is. I think that the fact that ENFJs and ENFPs often do find one another, since we are so outgoing and so people-oriented, people of both types, since people of both those types tend to work in the same domains, we show up a lot in education, we show up a lot in counseling, and to a somewhat lesser extent for ENFJ, also in the arts. But there are plenty of ENFJ writers out there. One of the close ENFJs that I'm thinking of is a professional musician and songwriter and song and music producer. And another one is, wrote her first book by age 30 and has done all kinds of oral history projects and so on. So we do tend to have some common interests, and we may be working in the same areas, like quite literally, and come across one another. And because we're both so outgoing and we're both vivacious and we're both people of both those types are also kind of off the wall and they're creative thinking, they can attract one another socially. And I certainly have found that to be the case. So I think what's happened is that because of those similarities, again, the obvious similarities, have, in my mind, overshadowed some very significant differences that are there. The one that I'm going to talk about today is just the one that I noticed, that it's something that I'd find to be a bit paradoxical with ENFJs that I know. And it is this. It has been the case quite often in my relationships with ENFJs that I've put the question to myself, what, as with the INFJs too sometimes, I say, like, what, I wonder what they see in me, When I look at the ENFJs that I know, here are some characteristics that come to mind that apply to, and again, these are individuals and they do have their, I'm not trying to just mush them into a blob, in my mind. They're very distinct from one another. But some broad characteristics that all the ENFJs I know and I've been close to share are very creative thinking, very bright, very driven, very ambitious. They put immense pressure on themselves to achieve and to perform. They're very conscientious. They're structured. They're organized. Very bubbly and vivacious. Most of the ones I know also are very stylish. They have terrific aesthetics. They have an artistic flair. They care about those things. They care about beauty in their environments. What else? And they're all very, very wound. They are very, very intense. And that's something that they share with ENFPs too. We're pretty intense as well. But compared to the ENFJ, often we're a lot more relaxed, and a lot more easygoing. And what I've noticed is that a dynamic that's come up for me over, and again, I don't know if this is generalizable, so it'll be interesting to see what viewers of this say, if they're ENFPs who have experience with ENFJs or vice versa. But I have found that very often what goes on, or just one part, or just a couple of parts of the dynamic between me and ENFJs, is that when we get close, is that very often the ENFJ will turn to me for a lot of reassurance. They will turn to me and really want to talk a lot about how unsure they feel about what decision they've made about something, or what boundary they put up with someone, or what good deed they've done for someone has been enough. Is it good enough? Was it okay to say no? Was it okay to stop just there in their contributions to such and such a project or event or whatever? And it strikes me that the paradox here is that almost in pretty much all cases, really in all, like, honestly, in all cases, this is what's so strange about it. Every one of the literally hundreds of times that an ENFJ who I'm close to has come to me to talk about, do you think that was okay? Or like, I think this person might be mad at me, like, and really need to talk it out and talk it out and talk it out and get a lot of reassurance. And I have to repeat it over and over and over and over again. I don't have to, but it's solicited, it's desired, it's obvious, and that's kind of a role that I have slipped into. Again, not universal, but I don't mean to imply that is, but it makes sense though when you think about it. ENFPs, what are we great at? We're very easygoing. Look at me. All right. This is the first video I've made in ages for the channel, and where I'm actually on camera for more than half a second. And look at me. I'm like, the color's nice, and this fits with what I'm doing today, which is not much public work, and I feel good in it. So there you go. So I find that it's very funny because in pretty much every single case of hundreds of cases where an ENFJ has come to me, an ENFJ loved one has come to me, seeking reassurance, seeking validation, that what they've done is good enough, that it measures up, that it wasn't bad, that it wasn't insufficient, that they're a really good person, that they were doing the right thing, that they did everything they could. In every single case that I can think of over decades, when an ENFJ has come to me for that kind of reassurance and validation, it has always been the case that ENFJ has not only met what I would consider to be basic standards of politeness, conscientiousness, kindness, thoughtfulness, thoroughness, but that they have gone above and beyond in every single case. They're not like ENFJs in my experience. They're not just good. They're above average in a lot of things from my point of view. They're very witty. They're very smart. They get a lot done every day. They are really on the ball. They're on top of things in their lives organizationally, checking things off the lists. They care very deeply about other people. They cannot be touched in terms of, instantly spotting the potential in people and really wanting to draw that out and develop it in a structured way to help people meet their goals and to advance in a human development way, or in a more, an educational way. And they really can't be touched at that. They are absolute masters of that, and they really shine in that area. And yet I will still, but again, and very stylish and very like they're fabulous, you know. They're, in my experience, ENFJs more often than not are fabulous. They're just fabulous, right? And yet they're coming to schlumpy, you know, they're coming to rumply, schlumpy, slouchy me to find out if what they've done is good enough. You know, if I think that it's good enough. You know, if I think it's okay to let it go at this point, you know, have they hit the mark? And I found that to be really, really strange. And it occurs to me that and again, I'm just, you know, as I do, kind of thinking aloud and trying it out, and very interested in what viewers have to say about this. I think that it's the case that since the ENFJs have extroverted feeling as their dominant function in their cognitive function stack, I think it's a very interesting thing to consider that although it is called, you know, it's called an objective judging function. Objective because it's extroverted in its attitude to this feeling function, this feeling judging function, decision-making function. It's oriented to the external world. It's very, very harmony conscious and very, very insightful and very intuitive about group dynamics and putting the right, you know, helping people very gently and gracefully, putting them in the right roles for the right kinds of tasks for maximum achievement of the group as a whole. And also, it's very important to them that that each individual that is under their care, if you like, as students or as staff, are satisfied in every which way with their jobs. ENFJs really, really care about that a lot and work very hard to make sure everybody's needs are met. Just excellent, you know, just very, very competent people. So anyway, extroverted feelings. So it's interesting that it's called an objective function for being concerned with objects, you know, in the environment, objects in the sense also of people, things in the external. But it strikes me that it looks extreme. It looks that FE in the dominant position with ESFJ and with ENFJ looks very, very different from what it looks like in the auxiliary position, as say with a type that I also know a great deal about, and I know many, many, many people who identify with, and that is INFJ. INFJs are usually known for being able to be rather dispassionate, very concerned with harmony, also very talented and very good at perceiving, you know, silently and intuitively perceiving the emotional needs of others and the tone, and to, you know, kind of massaging the communications and sort of to just promote harmony between people interpersonally. But INFJs tend to be, of the NFs, it seems that they have a reputation amongst themselves and amongst others who know them well, of being rather, compared to the other idealist types, of being not very apt to take things personally, although they are very emotional also and very warm, you know, compared to the other types. But it's very different. FE in the dominant position with ESFJ and ENFJ is very thin-skinned, and in my experience, and takes everything personally, and very intensely so. There is nothing like an ENFJ who has perceived an offense or who is hurt about something, and their feelings are hurt very, very easily. There's, again, ENFPs aren't so far behind, but an ENFJ who perceives there to be an interpersonal problem with someone that they care about, there is nobody who has the stamina for processing something all night until the thing is completely talked out and completely processed, completely resolved, and tied up with a bow like an ENFJ. And I think most people find that it certainly has been my experience with all of these ENFJs that, you know, if they're going to go in there with you, basically, if you want to be close with them on a personal level, then you had better be ready to do that, because they cannot have a relationship with you that's just kind of light and just chipper and easygoing and light and whatever. It's like it's very unlike anything with an SP type. They are very, very, ENFJs do not mess around. They are very, very, very emotionally intense, and they're very, very high strung, and their standards are very high. They put immense pressure on themselves to perform extremely well, and like what's good enough for most other people is not good enough for them, and they have a hard time, I find, to, sort of objectively measuring, their own performance as to whether it's good enough or not. And I think they need a lot of reassurance about that. And anyway, so yeah, extroverted feeling in the dominant position. It's like, it seems to me that maybe one really like haunting and difficult thing, like each type sort of has its own, I was going to say tragedy, but I feel like that's too melodramatic, but its own, sort of chronic recurring motifs that are of challenge. And I think one of the ones for ENFJ is that they are so very driven and put such pressure on themselves to be really, 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 really beyond the pale in what they do. But because it's external feeling, they rely on the outside to a good extent to feed back to them that they're doing well. Like they need the external world. They need the people in that world to reassure them that they're good enough, to reassure them that what they did was the right thing, to reassure them that their way is the best way, and so on and so on. And it strikes me that must be a really, someone with FI in prominence. It strikes me that must be very, very hard, and I know that it is. I know that it is from the ENFJs that I've loved, that I love and that I have loved. That it's something that haunts them all the time, and it's almost like that need for the external validation of what is to me just way above average performance in every which way, hitting all the marks. That they need that, and that's really hard for them. Another thing that I think, and that I've talked at least with one ENFJ. I'm going to talk with some more too that I know and see what they think of this. Another thing I think that can be very hard for them is that they are born leaders. The ENTJ with TE in the dominant position in their cognitive function stack. Those are kind of known as some of the, and the ESTJ are known as the ultimate born leaders, executives, getting things going, getting projects going, getting results, and in a very efficient way, and being very bold about that. ENFJs, in my experience, are also quite a bit like that. But of course, the big, one big difference. There are big differences. I don't mean to just gloss over that, but having an extroverted judging function in the other extroverted judging function in the dominant position, that makes someone a leader, a very strong leader, a born leader with groups of people, particularly. And they could be doing it in various domains too. ENFJs, you can count on them. They are very competent, reliable, conscientious, and usually very intelligent people. So, and they have the drive to be in charge as well, because they need to see, again, with FE in the dominant position, they need to see results too. But their sort of way of going about it is very involved with feelings, and it's very involved with the satisfaction of others and harmony in the group of whatever org they are heading up, whoever's under their supervision. So their leadership style is very strong, but it's a very feeling-oriented one too. But I think one of the things that can be difficult for them is that because they're so energetic and they need the results and they have very high standards and they are born leaders. They often will rise to positions of power in the organizations they're a part of. And something that can be very hard for them too, another thing that can be very hard for them is that they can be, I think, sometimes a bit uncomfortable with an aspect of their power, in that a terrible thing that can happen with them is that there can be people who are threatened by them because they are, so again, they're charming and they're gregarious and they're outgoing and they're smart and they get shit done, in a serious way. They're very competent usually in what they're doing, unless there's like some other, hugely mitigating circumstantial factor in their life. So they threaten a lot of people. And if they're women ENFJs, in these leadership roles, of course, there's always, more flack that comes at powerful women who are obviously powerful, who are obviously in charge. And this can be really hard for an ENFJ, I think, particularly an ENFJ woman in such a position, because on the one hand, they are bossy. I mean, but of course they're bossy people sometimes, but not necessarily in a negative sense. But the thing is, they need to see things move forward. They need goals to be set. They need a timeline. They need a plan. They need to execute. They need the cooperation of others to do that. And because they often are, rise through the ranks and find themselves in positions of power, they are in charge. They're large and in charge. And that's really what they're born to be, in many of them anyway. They certainly have the sort of native talents, or native, native talents that could be developed in any case through life experience to become very excellent as executives. And particularly in the domains of human development and teaching. And so they can find there can be a lot of kind of blowback coming at them, particularly the ENFJ women in positions of power, because people perceive them to be, sometimes to be domineering, or to be bossy, or to be, too intense, and they're intense. I mean, you feel it when an ENFJ is like having a talk with you. It's a lot of energy coming your way, and it's very focused. So, if that ENFJ has underlings that are, or colleagues who are threatened by them, then sometimes the ENFJs can have some unpleasant kinds of reactions to deal with, and counter resistances to deal with. And I think that's really unlike this is where they and, the ENTJs part ways. Like when in my experience, social experience with the ENTJs, when people are jealous and threatened and whatever, the ENTJs are just completely unbothered by that. They're just like, yep, that's your problem. Anyway, moving on. They are very apt to not take it personally. It doesn't get them down, doesn't bother them. They just steamroll, full steam ahead with their projects. ENFJs will also, be full steam ahead with their projects, but because of the extroverted feeling in the dominant position, they're going to be extremely sensitive and take a lot of things personally. And I think it can be really hard on them if they find out that they are perceived by underlings, usually, or colleagues in some cases, as being too bossy, or too controlling, or too whatever, what could be, I think, very often could be just, if the people weren't insecure and threatened, would be like very competent, right? Like people you want to be in charge because they can totally handle it. They can get some flack for that they don't deserve. And I think that because they're ENFJs, they will take that very much to heart. That's going to really hurt them. It's going to really disturb them, and make them feel extremely misunderstood. And in those cases, where they're being labeled as, the women ones, for example, are being labeled as like ball busters or whatever. I think it's so unfortunate and it really is a misunderstanding to some extent, at least, because if there's a person of a type that is the absolute last one that wants to offend you, the absolute last one that wants there to be disharmony in the group that they're leading, the absolute last one who wants to bother you in any way, or to be seen as less than near perfect. It's the ENFJ. Um, so, it's something that I really feel. If there are any ENFJs watching, it's something I really feel for you guys about. And I just want to say in wrapping up that, first of all, I just would love your feedback, and or people who also love ENFJs, know ENFJs well. I'd like to hear from you and see what you think of those ideas, observations. And I also want to say to any ENFJs who are watching that I want you to, again, I know that you probably, will always be restless about, it's just your nature to be, wanting and needing that validation and always wondering, was I good enough? Did I do well enough? Did I do well enough by that person? But I'm here to tell you that I'm a big fan and I'm a big admirer. And as I said, in every single case of hundreds that an ENFJ loved one has come to me to see if I think they've done well enough, my reaction has invariably been laughing in disbelief because it is so obvious to me that what they've done is so above and beyond. It's above and beyond in pretty much every single case. And it has never been the case that I've thought to myself quietly, like, oh, I don't know, you could have been nicer to that person, or you could have been more generous with your time, or could have been, less lackadaisical about that. These are things I have never thought, ever, of any of my ENFJ loved ones over the years. So I really urge you guys, if you're watching, I really, to the extent you can, I want you to give yourselves a break and give yourselves a pat on the back. And yes, keep getting the reassurance that you need from people you trust and who love you. But just know that my hat's off to you. And I think that chances are, objectively speaking, insofar as one can be objective about such things, which sometimes is far for competencies, you people are generally doing really well. So I hope you can give yourselves a break about that sometimes, and realize just how good you tend to be. So that's it. That's all. Thanks for joining me again, if you have. And it's nice to be talking about MBTI again. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.